Ma'aser Sheni, Perek Hey Mishnah Aleph. Kerem Ravai. The beginning of this parak is not about Ma'aser Sheni, but about the halachas of Ravai, which is the fruit of the fourth year of a tree. They're discussed here because there are many similar halachas to Ma'aser Sheni. The Torah says that when a fruit tree is planted, the fruits produced during its first 3 years are aser, and these are known as arla, which we have Masechta Arla to tell us those halachas. The Torah says weiter that the fruit of the fourth year should be treated as kodesh. This means that the fruit of this year should be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten there like Ma'aser Sheni, or it should be redeemed with money, and the money should be taken to Yerushalayim and used to buy food to eat there. The fourth year fruit is called Ravai. Since it's not obvious to anyone besides the owner which trees are Arla and Ravai, the Chachamim were concerned that people might take fruit from them and eat it without realizing that the fruits are aser. The Chachamim therefore were geyser that the trees should be marked in a certain way to make their status clear to everyone. This Mishnah is going to describe these markings. In passing, it also describes how kvarim were marked to prevent kehanim from becoming tamei by them. The Mishnah here applies to all types of fruit trees and not just to vineyards. The Gemara Brachos and the Flamet Hay brings a machlekes whether a Mishnah should be about Kerem Ravai or Neter Ravai. So Kerem Ravai, which would be just vineyards, or Neter Ravai, which would refer to all fruit trees. Since the halacha follows the view that it applies to all fruit trees, the Rav explains the Mishnah according to this shita. The standard texts of the Mishnah have Kerem Ravai in the first 3 Mishnayos of the parak, but then switch to the reading of Neter Ravai. So Kerem Ravai, Mitzayin Noisei B'Koizos Ois Hadama. Kerem Ravai, the fourth year of a vineyard, is marked with clumps of earth, which are placed next to the vineyard. The Chachamim chose clumps of earth to mark Ravai because earth is similar to Ravai in the following way. It cannot be eaten in its present state, but can be a source of a later benefit. When we plow it, plant it, and then harvest its crop, so too with Ravai, although we can't eat it as it is, we can benefit from it by redeeming it as fruit. V'shel Arla b'charosis, and an orchard of Arla is marked with clay, a type of earth from which earthenware utensils are made. Clay is a form of earth that has no use to a farmer. Since crops can hardly grow in it, so too Arla has no benefit since it can never be used. V'shel kvaros b'sirum u'machav v'shoifech, and grapes, kvarim, are marked with lime, which is mixed with water and poured over the grapes. What's the point in this? A person who touches a grape or steps over it becomes tamei. Kvarim were therefore marked to warn kahanim and nazirim who are forbidden to be metamei l'meis, not to walk near the kever or over it. Lime was chosen to identify a grave because lime is white and resembles bones, which are white. The lime was dissolved in hot water in order to make it even whiter, to make a heker, to make it recognizable for kahanim and nazirim that they shouldn't go there. Reb Shimon Gamliel. Says Reb Shimon Gamliel, B'med Dvar Mamurim, what are we talking about? B'Shvius. Ravai and Arla trees must be marked only during the Shemitah year when the produce of Eretz Yisrael is ownerless and anyone is allowed to enter another person's field and take some of the fruits growing there to eat. But in other years, when it's outside to take someone else's fruit without reshus, there's no chiyuv to mark Ravai and Arla trees because we're not achroi for protecting a ganav from the consequences of his crime. Everyone agrees that at least during Shemitah, these trees have to be marked to prevent people from doing an avera. V'hatznuim, the pious people, the modest ones who wish to prevent people from doing averas, didn't just rely on marking their Ravai, but menichin es hamois va'imrim kol anilkat mizeh mechulal al hamois ha'elu. They would set aside money, they would set aside coins, and they would say any Ravai that's picked from these trees shall be redeemed onto these coins. In this way, any fruits eventually taken from this orchard were redeemed and permitted to be eaten. Mishnah Beis. Kerem Ravai haya oila l'Yerushalayim. Generally, the bailam of Paris of Ravai had the option of either bringing them to Yerushalayim to eat it there, or to redeem them and bring the money to Yerushalayim. However, the Chacham were geyser that in certain places the fruits themselves must be brought to Yerushalayim, and you may not be paid to them. So Kerem Ravai haya oila l'Yerushalayim. The produce of a fourth year vineyard would be brought up to Yerushalayim and not be redeemed. Mahalachim echel l'chol sad. If it grew within 1 day's travel of Yerushalayim in any direction, the Chacham made this exerus that the markets of Yerushalayim would be well supplied with fruit. Since those traveling to Yerushalayim from within a day's journey would bring their own fruit to eat, they would not need to buy any in Yerushalayim, and there would be more fruit there for everyone else. However, the Chachamim didn't want to put people in the trouble of bringing their own fruit to Yerushalayim if it took more than a day's travel to reach the city. This Gzera applies to all types of fruit trees and not just vineyards. Ve'ezi hitchuma, what are the boundaries of this area? Eilas min hadorim, Eilat from the south. This is not the same as present-day Eilat, which is more than a day's travel from Yerushalayim and was not part of Eretz Yisrael in the times of the Chumash or in the Mishnayos. Va'akrivas min hatzafon, loid min hamayrev, va'yardin min hamizrach. And the Yarden is the Jordan River from the east. Any place within these 4 points is within a day's travel of Yerushalayim, and the produce growing there had to be brought to Yerushalayim. Umisharabu Aperis, they were at one point they canceled this gzeira. When the fruit became plentiful in the markets of Yerushalayim, and it was no longer necessary for a Ravai to be brought to the city to ensure a large supply of fruit, the Chachamim canceled the original gzeira and were geyser that the parents of Ravai must be redeemed just outside the walls of Yerushalayim. But Tanai Haya Hadavar, there was a condition attached to the new gzeira, that whenever the Chachamim of a later generation would want to restore the original gzeira, the halacha should return to what it was before. The Chachamim who canceled the original gzeira were concerned that at some future time there might again be a shortage of Paris in the markets of Yerushalayim. Therefore, they made it tonight that the new gzeira should not be considered permanent, so it should be withdrawn should the need arise. Rabbi Yossi says, "Mishachar Beis Hamikdash haya hatanai hazeh." Rather, it was after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed that the Chachamim canceled the decree and they added a different Tanai. And the condition was that when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, the halacha will return to what it was before, when fruit within a day's travel of Yerushalayim had to be brought there. According to Rabbi Yossi, the gzeira will not be reinstated by a later Bezdin, rather it will automatically return when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, and will again be appropriate to have Yerushalayim's markets full of fruit. Now the Pashtus is when the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, you won't have to worry about the markets of Yerushalayim not having enough fruit. But from a more of a halachic perspective, we want to hold on to the gzeira in a sense. Mishnah Gimel, Karam Ravai, Beishamei Omrim Ein Lai Chaimesh, Ve'ein Lai Bir, Ubeis Hillel Omrim Yesh Lai. We mentioned previously that Ravai is similar to Ma'aser Sheni, that it must either be eaten in Yerushalayim or be paid. The Mishnah, which appears in Masechta Peya and in Edius, brings two machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, how far the similarity between Ravai and Ma'aser Sheni extends. So the first machlek is that Beis Shammai say that it doesn't have a chaimesh, meaning when you're paid it, you don't have to add a chaimesh, and it's not subject to the law of removal in the 4th and 7th year of the Shemitah cycle. The Mishnah will teach us that Ma'aser Sheni is mechuyev in beer. That means that a person must eat all his Ma'aser Sheni produce and use up all his Ma'aser Sheni money before Pesach of the 4th and 7th year of the Shemitah cycle. Any Ma'aser Sheni or Ma'aser Sheni money that's still left at that time must be destroyed. Beis Shammai holds that the halacha of beer does not apply to Ravai. So someone who has Ravai in his Rishus at the Pesach of the 4th or 7th year of the Shemitah cycle does not have to destroy it, rather he can take it to Yerushalayim or be paid even afterwards. Beis Hillel say Yesh Lai. Ravai does have a chaimesh and does have a din of beer, just like the din of Ma'aser Sheni. The Torah refers to both Ravai and Ma'aser Sheni as kodesh. These words create gzeira shava between Ravai and Ma'aser Sheni, teaching us to learn the halachas one from the other. Kodesh hilulim, and we darshan chilulim, yalfi kodesh mi מעcer, and it has all dinei מעcer according to Beis Hillel. So the question arises that if gzeira shava is halacha l'maisha misinai, so then how is it possible for there to be machlekes Tanoa, machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about gzeira shava? So Brisker Rav in Tmura gives the following answer. He brings the Gemara Tmura says in Aftazvav that B'me'evle Shal Moshe was nishtakach hundreds or thousands of halachas, and until Asniel ben Kenaz was machzirim b'pulpulam. So it could be that there were certain gzeira shavas that can be argued about, because maybe it was a real gzeira shava, maybe it wasn't a real gzeira shava. This is all going with the shita that ein adam done gzeira shava me'atzmai. This is all going according to the shita that holds that a person is not allowed to be done a gzeira shava on his own, that he cannot create his own gzeira shava, but a gzeira shava would have to be passed down from generation to generation, Allah l'maisha misinai. But according to the Manda Omar that holds that Adam is done gzeira shava me'atzmai, so then you wouldn't have to come onto this whole teretz altogether. Beis Shammai, I remember another machlekes by Karam Ravai. Yesh le perj yesh le oilo litzaniyim padin le'atzman. The fruit of Karam Ravai is mechuyev in the laws of parrot and oilolais, which we learned about in Masechta Peya. Parrot refers to the grapes that fall for clusters as being picked, and oilolais are undeveloped clusters. The Torah is mechayev the owner to leave parrot and oilolais for the poor to take. According to Beis Shammai, Ravai is considered kadosh only in that it must be eaten in Yerushalayim, but otherwise as mamin hedyet. Therefore, Ravai is subject to parrot and oilolais like all other grapes. Masha Enkin Beis Hillel, Omrim Kula Lagas, all of the Ravai grapes, including the parrot and oilolais, go to the winepress of the owner, and the poor has no right to them. Beis Hillel hold that Ravai is like Ma'aser Sheni, and they also hold that Ma'aser Sheni is not considered the owner's property, but rather it's Mama Gavaya. Therefore, Ravai is exempt from all the gifts of all the Matnas Haniyim, as will be the case with any property that's Kaddish. The owner may thus gather the entire crop, press it into wine, and bring it to Yerushalayim to drink there, or he may redeem it and take the money to Yerushalayim. Beis Hillel say Kulei Lagas. Why did they say Kulei Lagas and not to the Bailam? To teach that it's preferable to press the grapes into wine and drink the wine in Yerushalayim rather than bring the grapes to Yerushalayim or redeem them and bring the money. Wine makes a person happy and better able to praise Hashem for the fruits. Kodesh Hilulim Lashem. It will be adding to the Hilul of Hashem, so you should hold on to that and bring that to Yerushalayim and celebrate it in that way. Which is the whole inyan, by the way, of Ma'aser Sheni and Ravai, is to take the pairs that you have and take the pairs that you have and be misameach l'fnei Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. It just Hashem gave us another mitzvah, another reason why we should have to come to the Beis Hamikdash. Mishnah Daled. Ketzad payda neder Ravai. How do we redeem produce of neder Ravai? Meiniach es asal al pishleisha va'omer kama odem reita liftas lebesela. The owner puts down a basket of fruit and have its value assessed by 3 experts, as we mentioned in the previous parak. Whatever price they set for this basket is then used for the rest of the Ravai fruits. The Omer, and he says to the 3 experts, how many baskets of such fruit would a person be willing to buy for a selah while the fruits are still attached to the tree? With the understanding that he will pay from his own pocket the expenses of taking care of the fruit until they're picked. This means, in effect, that the value of the fruit is assessed in such a way as to allow the owner to subtract the cost of taking care of the fruit until it's picked. The lower price is what he must pay to redeem the Ravai fruit. So he then puts down coins equal to the amount of produce that he wants to redeem, and he says, any fruit that's picked from this tree is redeemed unto these coins at the rate of such and such a number of baskets for a selah, and this rate would be established by the experts. Ravai fruit cannot be redeemed while it's still attached to the tree. He therefore puts aside the money and leaves it available for the pidyon to take effect when the rest of the fruit is picked. Since he's redeeming his own fruit, he will have to add a chaymesh according to Beis Hillel, as was mentioned in the previous Mishnah. Mishnah Hey, ubashviyas peidei ubashavyai. The previous Mishnah taught that we calculate the redemption price in a way that subtracts the owner's expenses from the value of the fruit. That the Mishnah teaches that there's a case where we would not take off this amount. However, if someone redeems Ravai that grew during Shemitah, peidei ubashavyai, he redeems it for its full value, and not according to the method described in the previous Mishnah. Since it's forbidden to work a field or guard it during Shemitah, the owner of a Ravai tree does not have any expenses during that year. Therefore, he must redeem the fruit at full value. Nor do people hire workers to pick for them in Shemitah. Rather, they pick the fruits themselves. Since each person may pick only the small amount he needs for his own family, there's no need for him to hire workers to pick all the fruit in the orchard. Rather, he picks what he needs himself. Moreover, workers were reluctant to hire themselves out to pick Shemitah fruit because their wages could become subject to the halachas of Shemitah, which has many restrictions. And if all the Ravai was ownerless, the owner declared his Ravai trees ownerless, and someone was kind to them and wants to be part of the fruits, he does not have a right to any reduction in the redemption price except for the cost of picking the fruit. The other work, however, was not done by him, so there's no reason to allow him any reduction for it. Someone who redeems the produce of his own 4th-year tree must add a 5th to it, obviously according to Beis Hillel, whether the fruit was always his, or whether it was given to him as matana. The Mishnah refers to fruit that was given as a gift while in a very early stage of development known as smodar, which is when the blossoms fall off and the little bollies of fruit first become visible. At this stage, the underdeveloped fruit is not yet considered fruit, and therefore does not yet have any kedusha of ravai. It therefore still belongs to the owner, and you may give it away as a gift. However, once the fruit passes this stage and it grows to the point where it's considered fruit, it becomes kadosh be'ravai and can no longer be given as a gift. It's because ravai fruit is now considered the property of its mama gavaya, and it's not the owner's personal property. Although ravai produce is the property of Hashem, its mama gavaya, the bailam of the produce must add a chaimish from redeeming it because the Torah considers it to be his for the din of the chaimish. However, he cannot transfer this bailam to someone else by giving it as a gift, since it's not actually his. Mishnah Vav. Erev Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach Shel Revi'is Shel Shviyas Hoya Bir. From here to the end of the Masechta, the Mishnah discusses the halachas of Bir Meiser and Vidui Meiser. Often a person would designate Meiser and keep them for a while, and only much later give them to the proper recipients, or in the case of Meiser Sheni, bring it to Yerushalayim at a later date. The Torah gives a deadline by which all Meiser must be removed from one's possessions. This removal is known as Bir Meiser, or just Bir. After Bir is performed, the Torah tells the owner to make a statement called Vidui Meiser, in which he declares that he properly fulfilled the mitzvah and all the halachas of taking off Meiser. There are actually two types of Bir. Some Meisers are removed from one's rishus by giving them to their proper owner, while others are removed by being destroyed, either by burning them or throwing them into the water, throwing them into the sea. The Mishnah talks about the latest time when Bir must be performed and how the different Meisers are to be removed. Pasuk says, Miksei shalish shanim taitis kol masat vasecha, Miket sheva shanim b'moed shnas hashmida b'chag hasukos, Malahalan regel, Avkan regel, Imalahalan chag hasukos, Avkan chag hasukos, Hamalam kizachal la'aser. Regel shall call masters kolumboy. Have you arms pesach shem pesach shana shlishis nagmar lis no kadum kulan atri have pesach shana revius. This is the drasha how we know that even though the pasuk says regel, it refers to Pesach as opposed to Sukkos. B'chein shal shana shlishis atri have pesach shana revius. It's erev Pesach. So erev Pesach on a year of biur, you have an extra mitzvah to do besides for the regular biur chametz that you're doing. You got to get rid of the meisers as well. So Erev Yom Tov for Rishon Shal Pesach Shal Revius for Shal Shviyas Haya Biur on Erev Pesach on the 4th and 7th year of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. There was the mitzvah of Biur Meiser. Someone who has Meiser in his possession must remove them before Pesach of the 4th year and Pesach of the 7th year. On Erev Pesach of the 4th year, he removes the Meiser remaining from the first 3 years of the Shemitah cycle, and on Erev Pesach of the 7th year, during Shemitah itself, he removes the Meisers remaining from the years 4 through 6. Torah says that beer is to be done after 3 years, which is understood to mean that the beer is required every 4th year of the Shemitah cycle for the produce of years 1 through 3, and on every 7th year for the produce of years 4 through 6. Produce of the Shemitah year itself is not mechuyev in Meiser. Okay. How is the beer performed? Naisin Truma Trumas Meiser Labailam. We give Truma and Trumas Meiser to their owners, which are the Kehanim, Meiser Rishon Labailov, Meiser Rishon to the Leviim, Meiser Oni Labailov, and Meiser Oni to the poor. Meiser Sheni v'Bikurim Mizbarim b'chol makom. However, Meiser Sheni and Bikurim must be removed from every place. That is, they must be destroyed. If there's not enough time to take Meiser Sheni and Bikurim to Yerushalayim and eat them there before the beer deadline, one has to destroy them. It's very interesting because Meiser Bikurim is from Shavuos to Sukkot or till Chanukah, right? That's what the Mishnah is going to say at the beginning of Bikurim. So let's see a little more about this. After a Levi receives Meiser Rishon, he separates a tenth of that and gives that tenth to a Kohen. That's called Trumas Meiser. The Mishnah teaches here that not only must the original owner give his Truma and Meisers to the proper recipients before the Zman Beer, so must the Levi give his Trumas Meiser to a Kohen as well. One fulfills a chiyuv to be mevar, to do beer of Trumas Meiser, Meiser Rishon, and Meiser Ani by giving them to the recipients. He doesn't have to destroy the Meiser. The Kohen, the Levi, and the poor person who receive these portions may eat them after the beer deadline, because if they don't have a chiyuv of beer, it's only the Yisrael, the Bailam, has to get rid of it by that time. Someone who grows any of the Shivas Haminim in Eretz Yisrael has to set aside the first fruits that begins ripening each year and bring them to Yerushalayim and give them to a Kohen, and that is called Bikurim. The Torah says regarding beer, "Bi'arti ha'kodesh min habayis v'gam nesatav la'levi v'lager v'layosem v'la'almana." I've removed the holy things from the house, and I've also given it to the Levi, to the ger, to the orphan, and to the widow. There's two things in this pasuk. I've removed the kadosh, and I have given. The Chacham interpret that "Bi'arti ha'kodesh min habayis," referring to Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim, which are called kadosh, and "V'gam nesatav la'levi lager v'layosem v'la'almana" is referring to Truma, Ma'aser Rishon, Ma'aser Sheni, and Ma'aser Ani. So Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim must be removed, which in this context means to be destroyed, while the other portions need only to be given to the required recipients. When our Mishnah says that Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim must be destroyed, it doesn't refer to food one will eat during the Yontif. On the day before Pesach, one has to figure out how much Ma'aser Sheni he'll eat on Pesach, sets that amount aside, and destroys the rest. Although the Chacham established that beer must be done on Erev Pesach, there's an exception for the food that will be eaten on Pesach itself. The Chachamim had the authority to do this, because Minat Torah, the Torah doesn't require beer until the end of the Yontif. Now it's interesting, because the Maisa, it would come out very well. Where's he being for Yontif? He's in Yerushalayim anyways, because it's a mitzvah Lila Regel. So now he has a good opportunity to go take his Maisa money and to use that there. So if he cheshbon zayis, how much money he needs for Pesach and for the Kabbanis and whatnot, so then he'll be able to take care of that over Pesach. Reb Shimon Omer, Habikurim nitanu lakehanim ketruma, Bikurim are not destroyed. Reb Shimon says, rather they're given to the Kehanim just like Truma. Reb Shimon holds that since the Torah refers to bikurim as truma, the halachos of bikurim are similar to truma. Therefore, just as the beer of truma is fulfilled by giving it to a kohen and not by destroying it, so to the beer of bikurim is fulfilled by giving it to the kohen. Hatavshil, if someone has cooked food that contains Ma'aser Sheni and he doesn't have enough time to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it there before the Zman Beer, Beishamai Amrim Tzarech Levar, he needs to destroy it because it contains Ma'aser Sheni. Beisil Amrim Hareu Kemavur, we view Ma'aser Sheni as though it was already removed. Since Ma'aser Sheni cannot easily be seen in the cooked food, there's no need to destroy it. Rather, one may keep the cooked food and eat it in Yerushalayim even after the Zman Beer. Mishnah Zayin. If someone has produce nowadays, when the Beis Hamikdash is not standing, and Ma'aser Sheni may not be eaten even in Yerushalayim, and the time for beer arrived, he must transfer the kedusha of the peiros onto money, bring the money to Yerushalayim and destroy it there. Beishamai learned out from a pasuk in the Torah that when there's no Beis Hamikdash, the owner still does beer of Ma'aser Sheni by being paid with money and destroying the money in Yerushalayim. He may destroy the coins by grinding them up and tossing the shreds into a river, or he may throw the whole coin into the ocean. When Ma'aser Sheni is money, or whether it's original produce, it has no permissible use nowadays, because not only Ma'aser Sheni itself, but also food bought with Ma'aser money may not be eaten anywhere. So there's nothing gained by redeeming the produce with the money. Rather, one may leave the produce unredeemed and destroy the produce itself. According to Beis Hillel, it doesn't make sense to say that the pasuk means that one must redeem the Ma'aser Sheni with the money, since nowadays the produce and the money are equally useless. So according to Beis Hillel, it's also possible to fulfill the mitzvah of beer with the produce itself. So you can just leave the peiros around and let it rot. Mishnah Ches. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, originally, as the deadline for beer approached, the Chachamim would send a message to Balabatim in parts of Eretz Yisrael out to Yerushalayim. Hurry and prepare, process your produce before the time of beer arrives. At first, the Chachamim held that Ma'aser, that you didn't have Ma'aser, that peiros that weren't Ma'aser were mechuyev in beer even before it was been fully processed. The completion of processing Gemar Malacha is different for each species of produce, as was mentioned at the beginning of Masechta Ma'aser. The processing of grain, for example, is complete when the farmer stacks the kernels of grain into a pile and smooths down the pile, as we mentioned many times and in the beginning of Masechta Ma'aser. They therefore sent messengers warning owners to finish processing the produce so that they could take off Ma'aser and send the Ma'aser to the proper recipients, or in the case of Ma'aser Sheni, to eat it in Yerushalayim before the Shas HaBir. Produce may not be gemaiset before it's been fully processed. However, if someone is over on this halacha and takes off Ma'aser of unprocessed produce, the Ma'aser would be valid, provided that the produce is ripe enough to be edible. The Chachamim originally thought that since it's possible to remove Ma'aser from something that did not have a Gemar Malacha, it can be viewed as something that contains Kedushas Ma'aser, and because it has Kedushas Ma'aser, it's mechuyev in beer. Therefore, if a farmer had unprocessed produce, he would have to process it, because otherwise Ma'asering it would be usher, then remove the Ma'aser, and then deliver the Ma'aser to the proper recipients to make sure that all this got done before the Zman Beer. The Chachamim sent out a shluchim to warn the farmers that the deadline was approaching. The practice of sending shluchim continued until Rabbi Kiva came and taught that any produce that didn't reach the Zman Beer, meaning that didn't reach Gemar Malacha, is patur from beer. The halacha of beer does not apply to unprocessed produce. So someone who has unprocessed produce doesn't have to do anything with it before the Shas HaBir. In this context, the term Einis HaMa'aser doesn't carry its usual meaning, but it refers to Gemar Malacha. Rabbi Kiva paskin that since it's usher to take off Ma'aser from unprocessed produce, such produce cannot be called Kadosh. It attains the status of holy produce only after its processing has been completed, and the Ma'aser is going to be permitted. Mishnah Tes. If someone's produce is far away from him and he can't deliver the Ma'aser to the proper recipients before this Zman Beer, Tzarech Likros Lahem Shem, he must name the recipients, he must name the people, the Kohen, the Levi, the poor person to whom he wants to give the Ma'aser, transfer the ownership of these peiros to them, this Ma'aser to them, and he fulfills the Chiyuv of Beer even though the Kohen, the Levi, the Ani doesn't have the Ma'aser in his hand. This method works for Truma, Ma'aser Rishon, and Ma'aser Ani, because the Chiyuv of Beer, in this case, is given to the recipients. But Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim must be destroyed, because he has to wait to come home and then destroy them. The Mishnah's halacha applies not only to Ma'aser that has already been separated, but also to on Meiser produce, which is likewise requires beer. In that case, the owner must first designate the Meisers, which he can do by identifying the location of each Meiser. For example, he says that Truma that's in the northern section of a particular pile of produce. He then names the recipient and transfers the ownership of the Meisers to them. Meiser Bram Gamliel v'az Kanim. There was an incident that took place with Rabbi Gamliel and his Kanim, which were Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Kiva, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Shehoyu Ban Besvina, who were traveling on a ship when Rabbi Gamliel realized that the Zman beer was approaching and he didn't yet fulfill his Chiyuv Meiser. Just one quick ha'ara. We have a Gemara Brachas on Chav Zayin with Beis, where the story was where Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was chosen to be the Nasi, and he was young, and Rabbi Kiva, the Gemara says, was very old. So it's interesting that we're referring to them over here as Kanim. Because Kanim is, like the Gemara Kedushin says, Zesha Kana Chachma. So it's not necessarily an age. Or maybe it means that when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah got older, I mean, he looked old because he had a white beard, right? That's what the Gemara says. But Agaparim, whatever it was, all these Kanim were traveling together. Rabbi Gamliel says, Isur Shani Osed Lama Nasan Li Yeshua. A tenth of my produce that I will measure out as my Sheni is given to Yeshua, who is a Levi. And the place, the land on which the Meiser Rishon is lying, is rented to him so he can acquire the Meiser Rishon by paying for the ground beneath it. In order to be kind of something, in order to make a kinyan, there's a difference between karka and metaltalin. One can acquire land simply by paying for it, but one cannot acquire movable objects unless he does meshicha or hagba. However, if there are movable objects on the land being acquired, the act of the kinyan performed for the land can work for the object as well, which is called the kinyan agav. In the Mishnah's case, therefore, Rabbi Gamliel rented out the land beneath the Meiser Rishon to give to Rabbi Shua, so that by paying for the land, Rabbi Shua would also acquire the Meiser Rishon. It's also possible to acquire the metalton through chalipin, where the recipient hands one of his possessions to the owner, and in exchange he acquires a movable object. Although this method is effective even if the movable object is far away, it was not used in the circumstance because the Torah does not allow the kinyan chalipin for the kinyan of Meisers. Isur acher shani osed lamoid nasan lakiva ben Yosef, and a tenth of my produce that I will measure out is Meiser Ani, is given to Akiva ben Yosef, who is a treasurer of charity for the poor. Gabay shel aniyim haya. It's interesting because sheyizka by la'aniyim said he'll acquire it on behalf of the poor, and the Meiser Ani's place is rented to him, so you can acquire the Meiser Ani by paying for the ground beneath it. In this way, Rabbi Gamliel gives Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani to their appropriate recipients. Rabbi Shua was a Levi. He was then required to separate Trumas Meiser from the Meiser Rishon, and he had just received, and he gave the Trumas Meiser to a Kayin. So before we go back, I just want to mention that we know that when Rabbi Kiva married his first wife, Rachel, when he was living by Kalba Savua, his shver didn't give him any money. And the Gemara explains how poor he was. So it's interesting over here that we're saying that he was a Gabay Shel Aniyim, that he'll take care of it for the Aniyim, right? Because we're saying here that, we mentioned before that Rabbi Kiva was a Zaken, especially in that Ma'aseh with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. It's interesting because the Ma'aseh, the Gemara says that Seif Yamav, Rabbi Kiva got married to the Gemara Nedarim, Eishes Tunis Rufus, and he got very, very wealthy at that point. Maybe he was always a Gabay Shel Aniyim. When did Rabbi Kiva become the Gabay Shel Aniyim? I'm not sure. Could be he always was, even when he was poor. But it wasn't necessarily that he was giving him the Meiser Ani because Rabbi Kiva was poor. The Rav says it's because he was a Gabay Shel Aniyim. It could be he was poor. It could be he was rich. Because Rabbi Kiva had different stages in his life. Kol Mekayim is Torah M'teich Ani, Seif L'Kayim M'teich Osher. And Rabbi Kiva can definitely be a good example for that. Rabbi Shua says, because Rabbi Shua got Meiser, and now he has to do Trumas Meiser. Isur Shani Osed Lamin Osin L'Elazar ben Azariah, a tenth of my Meiser Rishon that I will measure out as Trumas Meiser is given to Elazar ben Azariah, who is a Kohen Mekayim Muskar Loi, and the Trumas Meiser's place is rented to him so he can acquire the Trumas Meiser by paying for the ground beneath it. After stating to whom they would be giving their Meiser, they received the rent payments from each other. And Gamliel received payments for Rabbi Shua for the place of Meiser Rishon, and another payment for Rabbi Kiva for the place of Meiser Ani. And Rabbi Shua received payments from Elazar ben Azariah for the place of Trumas Meiser. Now the Mishnah does not say what Rabbi Gamliel did with the Truma. Presumably, he separated his Truma before he left home and gave it to a Kohen then, because it was the custom to separate Truma as soon as possible. So this Mishnah is just just to mention an interesting ha'ara, because we know in the Haggadah Shal Pesach we say, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Kiva, all these Tanaim Shayim Misubim b'Bnei Brak, right? So the question is, what were they doing in Bnei Brak? So the Maratchias in Sanhedrin on the Vlamed Beis and Beis asks a kasha. The Gemara mentions a place where all these Tanoim lived, and Rebbe Lezer's place was in Lud. And Rebbe Lezer says in Sukkah and Avchavches, that they don't leave their house on Yantif. So Vus Epis, the Rebbe Lezer was found in Lud on Yantif, on Pesach. So Rav Reuven Margolis, the Margolis Hayam, uses this Mishnah. It's him, and I saw others also use this to be Miyasher, that Maratchias is Tzarech and Godel over there, that this obviously was Erev Pesach because he was taking care of the beer Meiser, and they got off the boat. It was Erev Pesach when they got off the boat, and they went to Lud, which is near Bnei Brak, and that's where they held their Pesach Seder, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Because otherwise Rebbe Lezer would have to be home, even though it doesn't mention Rebbe Lezer here at all. It mentions Rebbe Loza ben Azariah, but yeah. And hopefully we'll get to talk about this in a later shir. Mishnah Yud. Let's go through the psukim of what the Torah says about Vidoy Meiser and the drashas that the parak is going to discuss until the end. The rest of the parak discusses the mitzvah of Vidoy Meiser. The Torah commands that after one has performed beer with his Meiser, he has to recite Vidoy Meiser, in which he declares that he separated the Meisers and dealt with them properly. This declaration is called Vidoy, which literally means confession, for the following reason. Originally, the firstborn son of every family was supposed to serve Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, and the father would have given most of his Meisers to his firstborn son. Accordingly, these Meisers would have remained in his house. After they were Choyte by the Egel Hazov, the Avodah was transferred to the Kehanim and Leviim, and the Meisers were then given to them. So it was due to the sin of the Egel Hazov that one must remove the Meiser from his house and give them to the Kehanim and Leviim. When one says the pasuk Bi'arti HaKodesh min Abayis, he is confessing about the Aveira and thereby causing the holy things to be removed from the house. As I state in Teis Yom Tov, brings this from this phone. So Bi'arti HaKodesh min Abayis v'gam nesatev la'levi v'la'ger v'la'yosem v'la'amon k'chol mitzvah asher tzivisoni le'avarti min mitzvosecha v'le'shachachti. I have removed the holy things from the house, and I have also given it to the Levi, to the ger, to the orphan, and to the widow, according to your entire commandment, kechol mitzvascha, that you commanded me. Lo yavarti mi mitzvasecha v'lo shachachti. I have not transgressed your commandments, and I did not forget. Lo yachalti ba'oini mimenu v'lo bi'arti mimenu b'tamei v'lo nasati mimenu l'meis shamati b'kol Hashem Elokai osisi kechol asher tzivisoni. I did not eat from it when I was at oinin. I did not remove it in a state of tumah. I did not give of it for the needs of the dead. I listened to the voice of Hashem Elokai. I have acted according to everything that you have commanded me. And then the last pasuk is a beracha, a tefillah. Hashkifa miman kachicha min hashamayim uvarech es amcha es Yisrael beis ha'adama asher nasat lanu kasher nishba'ta laviseinu eretz zovas cholav udvash. Gaze down from your holy place from the heavens and bless amcha es Yisrael, and the land which is Eretz Yisrael that you have given us, as you made a shvua to Avaisenu, to the Avis, Eretz Avos Chol Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. In Mincha b'Yom Tov ha'achron ha'im izvadim. On the afternoon of the last day of the Yom Tov of Pesach, they recited this Vidoy. Ketzad haya Vidoy. What is the meaning of the Vidoy? So Bi'arti HaKodesh min Abayis ha'Ma'aser Sheni min Eter Ravai. The pasuk says Bi'arti HaKodesh min Abayis is referring to Ma'aser Sheni and Eter Ravai. These must be removed from the house, either by being taken to Yerushalayim and eaten there, or if that's not possible, destroyed in accordance with the halacha of beer. Nesatev la'levi z'ma'aser Levi. The next words, I've given it to the Levi, refer to the Ma'aser of the Levi. V'gam nesatev zu truma trumas Ma'aser. The words v'gam nesatev is referring to truma and trumas Ma'aser, which means to be given to a kohen. La'ger v'layosem v'la'almana is referring to z'ma'aser ani aleket v'atricha v'apeya. The next words to the orphan, to the widow, are la'ger v'layosem v'la'almana, are referring to Ma'aser ani leket shich and pei, which are given to the poor. Afal pisha enem akven es havidoy, leket shich and pei are included in the vida, even though they don't prevent the vida from being recited. Someone who transgressed the law and took these portions for himself may still recite the vidoy. Min habayis is uchala. The words from min habayis refer to chala, which is a portion of dough that must be given to a kohen. The house alludes to challah because challah is separated from dough which is prepared in the house. This is in contrast to the other maasers, which are given in the field, and the produce is brought inside. Mishnah Yud Aleph. The pasuk, according to your entire commandment, that you separated the maisus in the proper order, which is bikurim, truma, maiser rishon, maiser sheni, and maiser oni. Therefore, if one followed this order, he recites the vidui. But if he goes out of order, for example, he separated maiser rishon, he separated maiser sheni before maiser rishon, he doesn't say the vidui. The next part of the pasuk of I wasn't over in any of the mitzvahs. I didn't separate from one species of produce on a different species of produce. For example, from wheat for barley. Not from the produce that's detached from the ground for produce that's still attached to the ground, and not from attached produce for detached produce. And not from the new crop for the old crop. Not from the old crop to the new crop. We could really touch each one what it is exactly, but we went through each one b'mekaymai, so we're just going to run through it quickly. The last part of the pasuk I didn't forget means I didn't forget to bless you and to mention your name on it, which means that he didn't forget to make a bracha when he separated maasers and redeeming maiser sheni. The bracha he would say is Asher Ketchanim Mitzvah Tzivon Lahafresh Truma, which is interesting because let's say by sukkah, we don't say a tefillah that lo shachachti to make a bracha on mitzvah sukkah. So what's the pshat in this? So we have to look into that. Hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. So although someone who forgot to recite the bracha has sinned only on the rabbinical level, he's disqualified from fulfilling the mitzvah deraisa of vidui ma'aser, since the Torah says that he has to lo shachachti. He says, "Asisi kechol levarti mitzvah lo shachachti." Mishnah Yud Beis. The pasuk goes weiter. Le'achalti ba'ayni mimenu v'le'bi'arti mimenu b'tamei v'le'nasati mimenu l'mei shamati b'kol Hashem elokoi asisi kechol asher tivisani. I did not eat from it when I was in Oinen, I did not remove it in a state of Tumah, and I did not give of it the needs of the dead. I listened to the voice of Hashem, Elokai. I have acted according to everything that you commanded me. Whereas the laws of the previous Mishnah apply only to Meiser, the Mishnah refers mainly to this pasuk. We're going to understand that it means mostly Meiser Sheni. I didn't eat it from when I was in Oinen. The owner avoided eating Meiser Sheni when he was in Oinen. He recites the vidui. Ha'am achlai. But if he did eat it when he was einin, he may not recite the vidui. Upon the death of a person's 7 closest relatives, a father, a mother, a brother, sister, son, daughter, or spouse, he becomes an einin. An einin is forbidden to eat ma'aser sheni, revai, or bikurim minat Torah. He's an einin the entire day of death, even after the kvura, until night. The chachamim, however, extended the period through that night following the p'tira. They also decreed that if the relative was buried after the day of death, the person remains an einin throughout the day of burial. And there's a Rashi, there's different mashmos, and exactly this is a very, this is, without going through the sugya, this is the basics of what aninus is. There's a different mashmos in different rishenim, different places, different gemaras, and hopefully we'll get to it at a different time. That's Hashem bli neder. But if he did eat it ba'aninus, eino yochel es vades, whether he's a oinin min hatera, whether he's a oinin midrabon. Lebi'arti mimena betame, I did not remove, meaning he didn't do the beer betuma. That is, he didn't separate ma'aser sheni for the sake of beer when he was tameh, and this caused it to become tameh. In that case, if he did it only betara, he may say that. But if he did separate it when he was in the state of tuma, making it tameh, he may not recite the vidui. To fulfill the mitzvah of beer with ma'aser sheni that has not yet been separated from produce that didn't take with ma'aser yard, one must first separate the ma'aser sheni, then destroy it. This may not be done by a person who is tameh because it will cause the ma'aser sheni to become tameh when he touches it. The Mishnah speaks of separating ma'aser sheni while tameh merely as an example. Any other way of causing tumah to ma'aser sheni is also forbidden and disqualifies a person from reciting the vidui ma'aser. Alright, but because we're talking about vidui, so we're going to go directly to that. The the person has to be mitzvada that he didn't give any of it to the needs of the dead. I didn't use the money of Ma'aser Sheni to buy a coffin or shrouds for a dead person. Although the Mishnah specifies the case of buying a coffin or shrouds, it does not mean to imply that buying similar items such as clothing for a living person is mutter. In fact, any use of Ma'aser Sheni other than eating, drinking, or applying to sicha, smearing, is aser. Rather, the Mishnah is making the following point. I did not give of it to the dead refers to the Ma'aser Sheni itself. Thus, it could have been thought that a person is disqualified from reciting the video and use Ma'aser Sheni itself for a dead person. Let's say he put Ma'aser Sheni oil on a dead person's skin, and if not, he used money for Ma'aser Sheni. The Mishnah therefore teaches that even someone who used money of Ma'aser Sheni for a dead person may not recite the vidui. And I didn't give the Ma'aser Sheni to other eininim who are also to eat it. Meaning because they also have to do with the relatives of a dead person. Shemati b'kol Hashem Elokai. What does it mean that I listened to the voice of Hashem? Hey, Vesav l'beis habechira, I brought it to the Beis Hamikdash. The word Elokai is referring to the Beis Hamikdash, or Hashem, it's Mashra the Shechina. The Mishnah is referring to the mitzvah of bringing bikurim to the Beis Hamikdash. However, the owner says this pasuk also means that he brought the Ma'aser Sheni to Shalayim as well. Asisi kechol asher tivisani, I've acted according to everything that you've commanded me. Samachti v'simachti by. This means I rejoiced and brought you joy, and brought joy to others with it. That is, I ate my Ma'aser Sheni in a state of simcha, and I brought simcha to others by sharing it with them. Regarding Ma'aser Sheni, the Torah says you should only eat it in the place that Hashem will choose, you and your son and your daughter and your servant and your maidservant and the Levi asher b'sharecha, and v'samach l'lefnei Hashem alekecha. This part of the video can also refer to bikurim, because by bikurim also says v'samachta. Okay. And it's if it's going to be on Yantif, then there's the added mitzvah of simcha, which is a separate mitzvah of simcha, but could do them together, the extra b'simcha. Okay, Mishnah Yud Gimel. Hashkifa mimayin kachecha min hashemayim asinu mashe gazarta aleinu av ata aseh mashe iftachtanu. The video ends with a tefillah that we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to look down from him. Ein kachecha ma'oin is one of the 7 rikiyim. Why dafke that one? Right? We say by shavar rach shesimcha b'ma'oinai. And Parshas was Sarach Ma'oina like Kedem, right? By concluding the video in this way, it's as though we are saying, we have fulfilled what you decreed upon us, we fulfilled all the halachas, av ata semachiv tachtanu, so you too fulfill what you promised us. Gaze down from your holy place from the heavens and bless your nation Israel, that is bebanim ubebanais. Bless us with sons and daughters. And the land you have given us, bless us with dew and with rain and offspring of animals. Animals are included in the bracha of lands because animals receive their nourishment from the ground. Hashem promised these particular brachas so we observe His mitzvahs, and the blessings for children and of animals is in the psukim. You swore to our forefathers a land flowing with milk and honey, so bench us, they'll put taste, a good time in the peiros. We ask Hashem to make our fruits sweet and rich as well as nutritious. Mishnah Yudalad, Mikan Amru, based on here, the last pasuk of the Vidui, which says, Es Hadama Asher Nosat Alonu, Yisrael Mamzerim Mizvadim. Yisraelim and Mamzerim may say the Vidui. A Mamzer is a child of a forbidden union with a child of another Mamzer. Although he's usher to marry an ordinary Yid, he's a Yid and he has to keep all the other mitzvahs. He's not part of mitzvahs at all. But not converts and freed slaves. They may not recite it, because they don't have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael. When a Eved Kanani gets bought by a Yid, he has to undergo a partial gerus. He has a bris milah, and he must be tayvel in a mikvah because he's required to observe some of the mitzvahs. When he's freed, he must complete his gerus by going back to the mikvah, because then he becomes mechuyev to keep all the mitzvahs. And he's a Yid, and he has a similar status of a ger. Of a ger. Remeir says, Af like Kehanim Leviim, Shalei not l'chelik ba'aretz. Kehanim and Leviim also don't say vidui Ma'aser, because they didn't take a share in the land of Eretz Yisrael. They can't say, as Adama, Asher Nosat Alonu. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yesh Lam Ari Migrash, Kehanim and Leviim have open cities which suffices for them to be able to recite the vidui. The land was apportioned only to the Yisraelim, not to the Kehanim or Leviim. Although Eretz Yisrael was divided among all the Shvatim except Shevet Levi, the Shvatim were commanded to give 48 cities of their own territories to the Kehanim and Leviim. These cities are called Migrash, because each was surrounded by an open ring of land in which building and farming was forbidden. Rabbi Yossi holds that Kohanim and Levim enjoyed full rights of ownership to these cities. He therefore rules that they can recite Vidui Meiser because they can honestly say V'esa'adama Asherno Satalonu. According to Reb Meir, though, the Kohanim and Levim may not say the Vidui Meiser on account of these cities because they didn't actually own them. They were granted the rights to live there. The last Mishnah in the Parak and in the Masechta. Mishnah Tezvav. Yechanan Kohen Gadol Hever Hodois HaMeiser. The final Mishnah, which is also in the end of Masechta Soita, lists various Gzeros of Yechanan Kohen Gadol, the first which is about Vidui Meiser. Yechanan Kohen Gadol was a Kohen Gadol after Shimon HaTzadik, who was the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash, in the second Beis HaMikdash. So Yechanan Kohen Gadol Hever Hodois HaMeiser. He brought an end to Vidui Meiser. Ezra HaSefer punished the Levim for not joining him when he went up to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel. He was geyser that Meiser Rishon should be given not to the Levim but to the Kohanim. Therefore, it was no longer appropriate to say Vidui Meiser the Gam Nesat of LaLevi. From the time of Ezra until Yechanan Kohen Gadol, people still recited the Vidui Meiser because the rest of the Psukim, meaning because first of all in the Torah the Kohanim are called Kohanim Levim because they're also from Shevet Levi. However, Yechanan Kohen Gadol argued that since the pasuk was specifying V'gam Nesat of LaLevi refers to the specific Meiser given to the Levi, so he said not to say it anymore. Av hu bitlas ha'ma'irim. He also abolished the wakers. The practice of the Levim in the Beis HaMikdash was to recite the pasuk of Ura Lama Sishan Hashem. And the Levim would stand on the platform in the Beis HaMikdash each day and cry out Ura Lama Sishan Hashem. So Yechanan Kohen Gadol put an end to his minig because there's no such thing as Hashem being asleep. The pasuk is obviously referring to the Golus, when Hashem seems to ignore our suffering and appears as if he is asleep. But it was not proper for the Levim to recite this when the Beis HaMikdash was still standing, so he was mevatel this. Ve'as hanoikvim, there was a practice in the Beis HaMikdash to make a cut in the offering's head right before it was shechted. Before an animal was shechted as a carbon, they would cut between the horns, causing blood to run into its eyes. This would temporarily blind the animal and make it easier to restrain it for shechita. Yechanan abolished this practice because this wound would look like a mum, and people might mistakenly think that a mum was being brought on the mizbech. Instead, Yechanan installed large rings in the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, which would hold the animal's neck in place during the shechita. This is reminiscent to the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, that they made a mum in the, either berisayena or on its lips. Ad Yamav hayapatish makeb Yerushalayim. Until his days, the hammer would bang in Yerushalayim during Chol HaMoed. The blacksmiths would work on Chol HaMoed, and he stopped them from doing so. Although melacha of a davra of it is mutter, the blacksmiths were allowed to work on Chol HaMoed to prevent the loss. Yechanan Kohen Gadol did not want them to work on Chol HaMoed because it was very noisy, and it was, if everyone else is being misameach and yantiv, it's just a zilzal, it's ab shemilsa, just doesn't look right, and it's a zilzal for it's mevazah samayid, it's a zilzal for the yantiv. And in his days, it was not necessary for anyone to ask whether Meiser had been separated from the Mai, because he was geyser that Meiser must always be separated from such produce. The Mishnah refers to the Gzera of eating the Mai before taking off Meiser. This decree was enacted by the Bezdin of Yechanan Kohen Gadol, because when obviously it's okay. One need not be concerned that it might be Tevel, since most Amei Oretz do take off Meiser, can be assumed that he did too. Some people, however, were more machmer. When Yechanan became Kohen Gadol, he discovered that it was only a minority that took off only Truma and not the rest of the Meisers, but the rest of them did. After he was geyser, this people stopped asking the Aretz if his produce had been Gemeiser because he may no longer be believed, and they would have had to Meiser it in any event as well. That was that.